The Galactic Colosseum stretched beyond imagination, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 3 suns. Millions of beings from across the galaxy packed the tiered seats, their varied forms creating a tapestry of alien civilization. Tentacles writhed in excitement. Chitinous claws clicked against armrests, and bioluminescent patches pulsed with anticipation. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biological anomalies. The announcer's voice boomed through translation matrices, reaching every ear, sensory organ, and telepathic receptor in the stadium. Welcome to the 300th anniversary of the Grand Tournament. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a cacophony of roars, clicks, whistles, and sounds that had no equivalent in any Earth language. The noise was deafening, primal, hungry for blood and spectacle. In the deepest holding cell beneath the arena, Marcus Chen sat on a cold metal bench, running his fingers through his dark hair. The human looked unremarkable compared to the monstrous beings he glimpsed during transport. Average height, lean build, no natural weapons or armor. Just flesh and bone wrapped in the standard-issue combat suit they'd given him. You know what's funny? Marcus said to the empty cell, his voice carrying a bitter edge. 6 months ago, I was debugging code and complaining about my Wi-Fi speed. Now I'm about to become alien entertainment. The cell door hissed open with hydraulic precision. 2 guards entered, their exoskeletons gleaming under the harsh lighting. The Nexery were insectoid creatures, standing 8 feet tall with mandibles that could snap steel. Their compound eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory interest. Time to go. Soft meat. One of them clicked through the translator. Try to die with some dignity. The crowd paid good credits to see you scream. Marcus stood slowly, stretching his arms above his head. Oh, I plan to give them a show they'll never forget. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass, though I doubt it's the kind they're expecting. The guards exchanged what might have been confused glances, difficult to tell with compound eyes. They'd processed thousands of fighters over the centuries. Fear, rage, desperation, madness. They'd seen it all. But this human's calm confidence was something new, something unsettling. The walk through the corridor felt eternal, yet instant. Each step brought Marcus closer to what the galaxy considered certain death. The walls were lined with memorials to famous fighters, their names etched in scripts from 100 worlds. None were human. None had even heard of Earth until recently. Tell me something, Marcus said casually to his guards. How exactly did humanity end up on your little tournament roster? Last I checked, we were still figuring out fusion power. The Nexery on his left mandible clicked what sounded like laughter. Your species made contact 3 cycles ago. Primitive radio signals, begging for peaceful friendship. The contempt in his voice was thick as oil. The tournament commission decided you'd make amusing fodder. Amusing fodder, Marcus repeated thoughtfully. I like that. Has a nice ring to it. The tunnel began to slope upward, and Marcus could hear the crowd growing louder. 60,000 beings screaming for violence, for spectacle, for the sweet satisfaction of watching something weaker than themselves get torn apart. The sound should have been terrifying. Instead, Marcus found himself grinning. One more question, boys, he said, stopping just short of the arena entrance. When they picked me up from Earth, did your intel boys happen to mention what I did for a living? The guards prodded him forward with energy spears. Move, meat. No one cares about your pathetic profession. That's a shame, Marcus chuckled, because I think it might have been relevant information. The arena gates opened with a groan of metal that echoed across the stadium. Blazing light flooded the tunnel, and Marcus stepped into hell itself. The roar of the crowd hit him like a physical force. 60,000 voices united in bloodthirsty anticipation. The arena floor was massive, easily the size of 3 football fields. Strange geometric patterns were carved into the sand, glowing with faint energy. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with implements of destruction from across the galaxy. Energy weapons, molecular blades, gravity hammers, neural disruptors. Enough firepower to level a small moon. Across the arena, 3 gates opened simultaneously. Marcus's opponents emerged, and the crowd's roar reached new heights of frenzy. The first was a Krugan berserker, 12 feet of muscle and bone wrapped in natural armor plating. Its 6 arms ended in claws that could shred tank armor, and bioluminescent scars covered its body like a roadmap of violence. The creature had killed over 300 opponents in sanctioned combat. The second was something the announcer called a void stalker. Though Marcus couldn't see it clearly, it seemed to bend light around itself, creating a distortion that hurt to look at directly. The few glimpses he caught showed something insectoid and graceful, with blades growing from its limbs like organic weapons. The third opponent made Marcus's blood run cold, though not from fear. It was humanoid but wrong in every conceivable way. Pale skin stretched over 2 long limbs, with joints that bent in impossible directions. Its face was a nightmare of smooth features and black eyes that seemed to absorb light. The announcer called a harvester and explained with gleeful malice that it preferred to keep its prey alive while feeding. In the red corner, the announcer's voice boomed, weighing in at 640 pounds. With a record of 300 wins and 0 losses, the slaughter of Sigma Prime vexed the unstoppable. The Krugen Berserker raised all 6 arms and roared, the sound reverberating through the arena like thunder. The crowd responded with equal fury, stamping feet and claws in rhythmic approval. In the blue corner, invisible until the moment of death, with a record of 215 kills, the Shadow of the Outer Rim, designation Wraith 7. The Void Stalker remained motionless, its distortion field making it appear as nothing more than a heat mirage. But Marcus could feel it watching him, studying him like a scientist examining a particularly interesting bug. In the green corner, the Nightmare that Hungers, with a record of 187 slow deaths, the Harvester known as Hunger. The pale humanoid thing tilted its head at an angle that would have snapped a human neck, and smiled with too many teeth. Several audience members in the front rows actually recoiled, their own predatory instincts recognizing something far worse than themselves. And finally, the announcer's voice dropped to a theatrical whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the massive stadium. In the yellow corner, representing the newly discovered species known as humanity, weighing in at 175 pounds, with a record 0 wins and 0 losses, the creature that calls itself Marcus Chen. The arena erupted in laughter. Not cheers, not roars of approval, but pure, mocking laughter that rolled across the stadium like a wave. Beings pointed at Marcus with claws, tentacles, and appendages that had no name. The human looked so small, so fragile, so utterly outclassed that his presence in the arena seemed like the setup to some cosmic joke. Marcus stood in the center of it all, hands at his sides, that same sharp smile playing across his lips. He looked up at the announcer's booth, then slowly turned in a circle, taking in the vast crowd. When he completed his rotation, he raised one hand and waved. The laughter intensified. Someone in the upper tiers shouted something that translated roughly to show us how humans beg for mercy. This triggered another wave of hilarity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Colosseum. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer continued once the laughter died down to manageable levels. Before we begin, let's hear from our combatants. Vex, any words for crowd? The Krugen stepped forward, its massive form casting shadows across the sand. I will tear the soft one's limbs off slowly, it growled, voice like grinding stone. His screams will echo in this place for generations. The crowd approved with enthusiastic roars. Wraith 7, your thoughts? The Void Stalker's response came from everywhere and nowhere at once, a whisper that somehow reached every ear in the stadium. Death comes on silent wings. The human will not see me until it's far too late. More cheers, mixed with appreciative hissing from the crowd's more sophisticated members. Hunger? The pale thing's voice was like rustling leaves mixed with distant screams. I will sample each organ while the heart still beats. The human will experience new dimensions of suffering. This time the cheers were mixed with nervous laughter. Even in a galaxy full of predators, the harvesters made everyone uncomfortable. And finally, Marcus Chen of Earth, any last words? Marcus walked to the center of the arena, his footsteps clearly audible in the sudden hush. He looked up at the announcer's booth, then at each of his opponents in turn. When he spoke, his voice was conversational, almost casual. Well, he said, scratching his chin thoughtfully, I suppose I should mention that your intelligence gathering needs some work. The crowd stirred uneasily. This wasn't the pleading, the bargaining, or the defiant posturing they expected from doomed fighters. This sounded almost like criticism. "See, when your people abducted me from Earth," Marcus continued, his voice carrying clearly through the stadium's acoustics, "they grabbed me during what we call office hours. I was at my desk working on a project." He began walking slowly toward the weapon racks, hands clasped behind his back like a professor delivering a lecture. "Now, I know you all think humans are primitive. I get it. We've only just figured out nuclear fusion. We're still stuck on one planet. We haven't even colonized our own solar system properly. From your perspective, we probably look like cavemen playing with fire." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, though they sounded less confident than before. "The thing is," Marcus said, running his fingers along the weapon rack like he was browsing at a hardware store, "intelligence gathering isn't just about technology level. It's about understanding what a species does with the technology they have." He selected a weapon that looked like a cross between a rifle and a tuning fork, examining it with professional interest. "For example," he continued conversationally, "did your scouts happen to mention that humans have been enthusiastically killing each other for our entire recorded history? That we've turned warfare into an art form? That we've developed thousands of different ways to end a life, and we practice them on each other constantly?" The laughter in the crowd was starting to die away, replaced by uncertain murmurs. "More importantly," Marcus said, setting down the energy weapon and picking up something that looked like a crystalline dagger, "did they happen to mention what specific kind of human they were abducting?" He tested the blade's edge against his thumb, nodding approvingly when a thin line of red appeared. "Because here's the thing about my species, folks. We specialize. Some of us are doctors, dedicated to preserving life. Some are teachers, focus on sharing knowledge. Some are farmers, engineers, artists, philosophers." Marcus looked up at his opponents, that sharp smile never wavering. "Me? I was a military contractor. Specifically, I designed weapon systems for urban warfare scenarios. My specialty was creating maximum lethality with minimum resources in confined spaces. The arena had gone very, very quiet. So when your people looked at my resume and saw software engineer, they probably thought I pushed papers around behind a desk. What they missed was the 23 countries that have my weapon systems integrated into their armed forces. The 16 conflicts where my designs have been field tested. The fact that I spent the last 8 years of my life thinking about nothing but the most efficient ways to kill things." Marcus set down the crystal dagger and turned to face his opponents directly. "But hey," he said with a shrug, "I'm sure that's not relevant information, right?" The Krugan berserker, who had been standing confidently in its corner, shifted its weight uncertainly. The void stalker's distortion field flickered, as if its concentration had been broken. The harvester's too wide smile faltered just slightly. "Combat begins in 30 seconds, the announcer called, but his voice lacked the earlier enthusiasm. The crowd's bloodthirsty anticipation had transformed into something else entirely. Curiosity, mixed with the first whispers of doubt. Marcus walked back to the center of the arena, empty-handed. He cracked his knuckles and rolled his shoulders, working out the kinks from months of captivity. "You know what the funny thing is?" he called out to the crowd, his voice echoing in the unnatural quiet. "I actually want to thank you all for this opportunity." He looked up at the sea of alien faces, his eyes bright with something that might have been gratitude or might have been madness. "See, back on Earth, there are laws, rules of engagement, international treaties, ethics committees, all sorts of annoying restrictions on what you can and can't do to your enemies. The countdown timer above the arena showed 15 seconds. But here," Marcus spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire Colosseum. "Here, you've given me a consequence-free environment to field test some theories I've been working on. No oversight, no rules, no limits. 10 seconds. You've basically provided me with a perfect laboratory. 5 seconds. And you volunteer to be my test subjects." The timer reached 0, and the arena's energy barriers dropped with a subtle hum. Combat was officially underway. None of Marcus's opponents moved. They stood frozen in their corners, suddenly uncertain. The human's words had planted a seed of doubt that was growing rapidly into something approaching fear. Marcus, however, started laughing. Not the desperate laughter of a doomed man, not the manic giggling of someone who had snapped under pressure. This was a genuine, delighted laughter of someone who had just been given exactly what they wanted. "Oh, this is going to be fun," he said, and took his first step forward. The arena held its breath. The first move came from Vex the Unstoppable, and it was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. The Krugan Berserker, despite its uncertainty, was still a creature of instinct and rage. It charged across the arena with all 6 arms spread wide, intending to overwhelm the small human through sheer force and brutality. Marcus didn't run. He didn't dodge. He took 3 quick steps forward, dropped into a crouch, and drove his shoulder into the sand just as the massive alien reached him. The Krugan's momentum carried it forward, expecting to grab empty air where Marcus had been standing. Instead, it found itself flying to the air in a perfect arc, the victim of basic physics and a well-executed hip toss. Vex crashed into the arena wall with a sound like a building collapsing, its armor hide cracking against reinforced barriers. The crowd gasped. That wasn't supposed to happen. Humans weren't supposed to have that kind of leverage, that kind of timing, that kind of tactical awareness. Lesson 1. Marcus called out cheerfully, dusting sand from his hands. Size matters a lot less than people think when you understand momentum and leverage. The Void Stalker decided to capitalize on the distraction. Its distortion field shimmered as it moved, becoming nearly invisible as it circled around behind the human. Wraith 7 was a perfect predator, evolved for stealth kills and silent death. Its organic blades were already extending from its limbs, sharp enough to cut through molecular bonds. Marcus, however, had spent 8 years designing systems to detect and eliminate stealth units. He'd studied every known form of optical camouflage, thermal masking, and sensor spoofing. The Void Stalker's distortion field was impressive, but it still displaced light in predictable patterns. Lesson 2, Marcus said, still facing away from the approaching assassin. Invisibility is just another tool, and every tool has weaknesses. Without turning around, he grabbed a handful of sand and threw it over his shoulder in a wide arc. The particles struck the stalker's distortion field, outlining his position like a constellation. For just a moment, the alien was visible. A moment was all Marcus needed. He spun on his heel and delivered a precise kick to what his sand mapping had revealed as the creature's center of mass. The impact sent Wraith 7 stumbling backward, its careful stealth approach ruined. But Marcus wasn't done with his impromptu physics demonstration. As the stalker tried to regain its balance, Marcus grabbed one of the energy spears the guards had dropped during his entrance. The weapon was designed for the insectoid Nexery, but the basic principles were universal enough. Lesson 3, he said, adjusting the spear settings would practice efficiency. Energy weapons work on frequency harmonics. Change the frequency, change the effect. He fired a modified pulse at the stalker's distortion field. Instead of a killing blow, the energy interacted with the alien's natural camouflage system, caused it to overload spectacularly. Wraith 7 became, "See, back home, we have a whole genre of fiction dedicated to creatures like you, beings from outside normal space and time, feeding on things that shouldn't be food, operating according to physics that make philosophers go insane. We call them eldritch abominations, and we spent considerable time thinking about how to fight them." The harvester's confidence faltered visibly. "Impossible. Your species has never encountered our kind before." "No, but we've encountered the concept," Marcus replied, examining the crystalline weapon with professional interest. "And here's what we figured out. If something exists outside normal physics, that means it has to create a localized field where its physics apply. Disrupt the field, disrupt the entity." He adjusted several controls on the device, and its harmonic resonance changed to something that made everyone in the arena feel slightly nauseous. "This little toy is designed for mining operations, right? Probably uses quantum harmonics to shatter molecular bonds in crystal matrices, but with a few modifications." The weapon's hum shifted again, becoming something that seemed to vibrate in dimensions that didn't have names. It becomes a reality anchor, a device that reinforces local space-time and makes it very difficult for extra-dimensional entities to maintain their exotic physics. The harvester recoiled as if slapped. The wrongness around it began to flicker, its impossible angles becoming merely improbable, its light-absorbing eyes reflecting illumination for the first time in eons. "You cannot!" it hissed, its voice losing its otherworldly quality and becoming merely the sound of a very frightened alien. "We are beyond your understanding." "Maybe," Marcus conceded, raising the modified mining tool, "but you're not beyond my weapon systems." The device discharged with a sound like reality tearing and immediately repairing itself. The effect on the harvester was dramatic and immediate. Its pale skin became merely albino instead of impossibly white. Its joints snapped back to angles that were merely double-jointed rather than geometrically impossible. Most importantly, its presence stopped making everyone want to run away screaming. Hunger looked down at its now merely strange hands in shock. "What have you done to me?" "Turned you into a regular alien instead of a cosmic nightmare," Marcus replied cheerfully. "Don't worry, the effect is temporary. In a few hours, you'll be back to making mathematicians cry just by existing." The crowd had gone from murmuring to open discussion. Beings throughout the arena were talking in excited, nervous voices about what they were witnessing. This wasn't just an upset victory. This was a demonstration that everything they thought they knew about combat, about tactics, about the natural order of the galaxy, was fundamentally wrong. But Marcus wasn't finished with his lesson plan. "Now then," he said, addressing all three of his opponents, "I think it's time we had a frank discussion about exactly what you've gotten yourselves into." Vex, still nursing his disabled arms, growled uncertainty. Wraith 7 flickered in and out of visibility as its damaged camouflage system tried to compensate. Hunger stood perfectly still processing reality of being reduced from cosmic horror to merely terrifying alien. "See, you all made the same mistake," Marcus continued, walking to the center of the arena. "You assume that because humans are primitive by galactic standards, we must be weak. That because we haven't mastered faster-than-light travel or energy manipulation on a stellar scale, we must be easy prey." He looked up at the crowd, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive stadium. "But here's what you missed. We became the dominant species on our planet, not through superior strength or natural weapons or evolutionary advantages. We did it through pattern recognition, tool use, and applied intelligence. We became apex predators by outthinking everything else on Earth." Marcus began walking in a slow circle, addressing the entire arena. "Every creature on my planet that was bigger, stronger, faster, or better armed than us is now either extinct, domesticated, or exists only in preserves that we maintain for our entertainment. We didn't beat them by being tougher. We beat them by being smarter." The arena had become so quiet that Marcus's footsteps in the sand sounded like thunder. "And then," he continued, "we got bored with conquering our own world and started practicing on each other. For the last 6,000 years, we've been refining the art of warfare against opponents who are exactly as smart as we are. Do you have any idea how advanced our tactical thinking has become when we spent millennia fighting enemies who can anticipate our every move?" Vex took an involuntary step backward. Wraith 7's distortion field flickered nervously. Even Hunger, reduced though it was, seemed to shrink in on itself. "So when you grab a random human and threw him in here for your entertainment," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the entire Colosseum, "you weren't getting a primitive savage to be torn apart by superior beings." His smile returned, sharper than ever. "You were getting a product of the most competitive, most ruthless, most sophisticated military tradition in the known galaxy. A member of the only species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that are smarter than it should be possible to kill." The silence stretched on for long moments, broken only by the soft sound of sand shifting in the artificial wind. Then Marcus clapped his hands together, the sharp sound making everyone in the arena jump. "But hey," he said brightly, "I'm not unreasonable. Tell you what, I'll make you all a deal." He looked at each of his opponents in turn. "You can forfeit right now. Walk out of here with your pride dented but your lives intact. Go back to your respective corners of the galaxy and tell everyone you meet that maybe, just maybe, they should reconsider humanity's threat assessment." Vex, Ray 7, and Hunger looked at each other, then at the crowd, then back at the small human standing calmly in the center of the arena. "Or," Marcus continued, his voice taking on an edge that had cut diamond. You can continue this fight. In which case, I stop treating this as an educational demonstration and start treating it as a field test for some weapon systems that I've been very curious about. He reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a simple metal sphere, about the size of a marble. He rolled it across his knuckles like a coin trick, the motion hypnotically smooth. This little beauty is something I've been working on in my spare time. I call it a neural disruptor grenade. It's designed to overload the electrical systems in organic brains. The theoretical yield should be enough to affect everything in a 50-meter radius. The three aliens took several rapid steps backward. Of course, it's only theoretical, Marcus said thoughtfully. I've never had a chance to test it on live subjects. The ethics committee back home wouldn't approve the paperwork. He looked up at the crowd with theatrical innocence. But there's no ethics committee here, is there? Just 60,000 beings who wanted to watch something primitive get torn apart for their entertainment. The crowd was beginning to shift restlessly. What had started as bloodthirsty anticipation was rapidly transforming into something approaching panic. Several sections were already beginning to evacuate, though whether from fear or simple self-preservation was unclear. So, Marcus said, tossing the sphere up and catching it casually, what's it going to be? Door number 1, where you all forfeit and we call it a day. Or door number 2, where I get to submit my findings to the Journal of Applied Xenobiology. Vex the Unstoppable, veteran of 300 battles, creature of pure rage and violence, looked at the small metal sphere in the human's hand and made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier. The berserker sat down, not collapsed, not fallen, but deliberately lowered itself to the arena floor and crossed all 6 arms in a gesture of surrender that was recognized throughout the galaxy. Ray 7's distortion field flickered once more, then disappeared entirely as the Stalker became fully visible and dropped to one knee in submission. Hunger, still processing its reduction from cosmic horror to merely terrifying, simply nodded once and stepped backward to the arena wall. The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in boos, but in chaos. 60,000 beings suddenly realizing that everything they thought they knew about the universe was wrong. Some were fleeing for the exits, others were arguing in dozens of languages, and more than a few were simply staring at the small human standing in the center of the arena like he'd just rewritten the laws of physics through sheer force of personality. Marcus looked around at the pandemonium and started laughing again, the same delighted, genuine laughter that had preceded the entire demonstration. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biological anomalies, he called out, his voice somehow carrying over the chaos. I think we've all learned something important today. The announcer, who had been silent since the reality anchor incident, found his voice again. The winner of this year's grand tournament by forfeit Marcus Chen of Earth. The proclamation sent fresh waves of confusion through the crowd. Several beings in the upper tiers actually fainted. Others were pulling out communication devices, presumably to warn their respective governments about the unexpected military implications of first contact with humanity. Marcus pocketed the neural disruptor grenade and waved to the crowd with both hands. Thank you all for this educational experience, he called out cheerfully. When you get back to your respective worlds, make sure to update your threat assessment databases. Humanity would like to be reclassified from primitive species suitable for entertainment purposes to do not engage under any circumstances. He paused, considering. Also, I'd like to request safe passage back to Earth, complete records of this tournament for my research files, and a formal apology from the Tournament Commission for the illegal abduction of an Earth citizen. The arena had begun to empty as beings fled for the exits, but Marcus's voice still reached those who remained. Oh, and one more thing, he added, his tone becoming conversational again. You might want to reconsider your expansion plans in the direction of our solar system. Because I'm just one guy, and I work in software. You really don't want to meet our actual military specialists. With that, Marcus Chen, formerly of Earth's defense contractor industry, currently the only human to win the Galactic tournament by forfeit, walked toward the exit with a satisfied expression of someone who had just completed a very successful job interview. Behind him, the arena continued to empty as the galaxy began to reassess its understanding of humanity. The laughter had stopped, replaced by the much more serious sound of civilizations reconsidering their foreign policy. The joke, it turned out, was on them.